Right now, you are standing at your kitchen sink, the faucet hissing into a glass, and somewhere under that sound is the faint sting of chlorine you stopped noticing years ago. And on the counter behind you sits a paper envelope from the water utility for roughly $94 this month, which is what the average American household now pays for water that arrives through a pipe owned by somebody else. Under $20 in materials, 1,000 gallons a month off an average 1,000 square foot roof in a single 1.5-inch rainfall. And my people, the old order Amish of Lancaster County, have done this for more than 180 years without permission. We have collected rainwater since the 1840s, and in 2012, your state health departments, the International Plumbing Code Committee that wrote Appendix C, and at least 12 US states made sure you would treat what falls from the sky like a crime. After the Springhouse cooling video I put out, hundreds of you wrote me the same question, and it was always some version of this: Amos, what do I do if I don't have a spring on my land? I was 11 years old, standing in a July thunderstorm under my grandfather Eli Fisher's barn gutter in Strasburg Township, watching the cedar cistern barrel fill, and when he handed me the dipper, the water tasted softer than well water, almost sweet, and I have chased that taste for 61 years. If you already own a house with a roof and gutters, you already own 90% of this system, and I am going to show you the suppression and the build in one sitting. I am Amos Fisher, and you are watching Amos Fisher Reveals. Subscribe so you never miss what the water industry hopes stays forgotten. Now let me take you back to a barn in Gordonville last August. My cousin Samuel Byler is 58, a dairy farmer with hands like worn leather, and his barn sits 3 miles east of Gordonville on a road that used to be wagon ruts. The rain started while we were standing in the milking parlor, the way Lancaster rain starts, all at once, and Samuel walked me out into it on purpose. The sound of that rain hitting his standing seam metal roof is something I want you to imagine, because that sound is money you are not paying. 24 feet of galvanized gutter, a 4-inch downspout, and at the base of the downspout, a 5-gallon vertical PVC chamber Samuel built himself for under $9 in fittings. That is the first flush diverter. The first dirty gallons off the roof, the bird droppings, and the dust and the pollen, they fill that chamber first, and when it is full, a small ball float seats with a soft clunk, and only then does clean water route into the cistern. The cistern is 1,500 gallons of ferro cement buried 4 feet below grade behind the spring house, and the water inside it holds at 54 degrees year-round because the earth around it never lets it warm up. Samuel pulled a metal dipper off a hook and drew me a glass straight from the line, and I tasted my grandfather's barrel from 1964 again, mineral clean, no chlorine bite, soft on the tongue. Samuel keeps a ledger his great-grandfather started in 1887, and every cistern cleaning since then is written in it in 3 different generations of handwriting, 138 years. And last spring, the county told him in a letter that under current code, he is not permitted to call what is in that cistern drinking water. The cistern did not change. The paperwork did. I stood in his kitchen reading that letter twice. Here is the physics that no plumbing inspector wants you to do in your head. 1 inch of rain falling on 1,000 square feet of roof yields 623 gallons of water. A typical Lancaster spring rainfall is 1.6 inches, which is roughly 1,000 gallons in a single afternoon, and a 1,200 square foot roof in most of the American Midwest will deliver 10,000 to 18,000 gallons in a year. Gravity does the work. Surface area does the math. There is no pump, no membrane, no patent, no subscription. The water industry sells you something the sky gives away for free, and it isn't new. It is older than Rome. In the Negev Desert and on the Minoan island of Crete, archaeologists have documented bedrock cisterns from roughly 1700 BCE carved by hand and lined with lime plaster, some of them holding 50,000 gallons per household, fed entirely by courtyard catchment and roof runoff. The principle did not change. The people changed. The Roman architect Vitruvius wrote in Book 8 of De Architectura in the 1st century before Christ detailed instructions for cisterns with sediment basins and overflow channels for first flush, and those same designs traveled into medieval European monasteries, where the monks lined their cisterns with cool stone the color of damp moss. When the Anabaptist farmers who became my people landed in Philadelphia in 1737, they carried that cistern in their heads across the Atlantic. They did not bring tools, they brought knowledge. A cistern is heavier in the mind than in the ground. My great-great-grandfather, Christian Fisher, settled near Intercourse in Lancaster County, and the family Bible margin notes record his first cedar-staved 800-gallon barrel set in 1842. 6 generations, not one water bill. A USDA Farmer's Bulletin from 1918, number 941, described farm cisterns as the standard rural water supply across half the United States, and that was not 100 years ago. That was inside the lifetime of people I knew as a boy. My uncle Reuben Stoltzfus, who died in 2009 at the age of 94, drank from the same cistern his father had set in 1907, and he never once paid for a drop of water that came out of his kitchen tap. Today, a standard old order farm runs 3 cisterns, one for the house, one for the barn, one for the garden, and Mary Stoltzfus, who is 67 and lives in Honeybrook, scrubs hers every April with a long-handled brush and a vinegar rag. And I have heard the squeak of her hand pump from across her kitchen at 5 in the morning. The system breathes. The first flush diverter swallows the dirty start of every storm. The sediment trap catches what the diverter misses. A column of sand and hardwood charcoal polishes the water before it ever sees a faucet. The overflow runs to the garden so nothing is wasted. There is no electricity. There is no utility. It is a living thing, slow and patient and indifferent to markets. Then the first inspector arrived. In 1974, President Ford signed Public Law 93-523, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and the EPA was handed the authority to classify every drinking water source in America. The rain did not change. The paperwork did. The federal standard required a disinfection chain, chlorine, or ultraviolet with monitored chemical residuals, and a roof and a cistern and a charcoal column do not produce a chemical residual. So the rule was written in such a way that a system that had fed half the country in 1918 could no longer legally be called drinking water in 1974 without a treatment chain my grandfather did not need and would not have understood. And this is where the story turns, because the suppression was never a conspiracy. It was 4 villains stacked on top of each other, and I want you to see all 4. Villain 1 is industry economics. The American Water Works Association reports the U.S. municipal water industry runs north of $74 billion in annual revenue, and the bottled water industry has now passed $94 billion, and both of those numbers shrink the day your roof starts filling a barrel. Villain 2 is regulation. The 2012 International Plumbing Code Appendix C set non-potable rainwater catchment standards so expensive to permit that most homeowners give up before they start, and through the early 2000s, rainwater collection was outright illegal in Colorado until 2016, capped in Utah until 2010, permit restricted in Nevada, and constrained in Georgia. Villain 3 is misaligned incentives. Municipal utilities are funded by per-gallon billing, which means every gallon you catch on your roof is a gallon they cannot bill you for, and developers building new homes have no reason to spend $1,500 on a cistern they will never pay a water bill against. Villain 4 is the historical displacement event, the slow one, the federal rural water expansion of the 1950s and 1960s, laying pipe across the countryside, then the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974, defining safe water in a way that structurally excluded the cistern, and then the bottled water boom of the 1990s, teaching a whole generation to pay for a sealed plastic copy of what their grandparents drew up out of the ground. It was not disproven, it was defined out of existence. I want you to sit with that sentence. No scientist ever stood up and said the cistern does not work. No university ever published a paper proving the charcoal and sand column was unsafe. The Amish farms with 138-year cistern records were never audited because the audit form did not have a box for them. The cistern was not killed. It was quietly removed from the menu. A plumbing inspector in 1958 in Lititz could approve a cistern without thinking twice. A plumbing inspector in 2008 in the same building had no checkbox on his form for non-potable catchment, no line item for a first flush diverter, and no continuing education credit that even mentioned the word. He was not corrupt. He was trained on a form, and the form was written by people whose paychecks depended on a meter at the property line. That is what structural suppression looks like, and it is more dangerous than any single villain because there is no one person to argue with. There is only paper. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me because this next part is specifically for you. You walk out to your driveway, you measure the downspout closest to your garden, you drive to the farm supply store and you buy one 55-gallon food-grade barrel for $15 to $25. You buy a downspout diverter kit for under $40, or you build one for nothing out of fittings you already have. You buy a $3 piece of fine mosquito screen and an $8 brass spigot kit, total cost under $50. You stack 2 cinder blocks under where the barrel will sit, so gravity gives you pressure at the spigot. You cut the downspout at the height of the top of the barrel. You fit the diverter. You screen the inlet so no mosquito can get in. You drill the spigot 2 inches above the bottom of the barrel so the sediment settles below it. You connect it to the existing gutter in 90 minutes. You do not need a permit for a 55-gallon barrel feeding a garden in any state I am aware of, but check your county before you start because the rules change county by county. The first rain comes and you stand there and you listen to it trickle, then pour, then run steady, and when you put your hand on the side of that full barrel, it is heavy and cool and yours. Garden use is legal in all 50 states. They never told you that either. The Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension Rainwater Harvesting Manual will walk you through it for free, and that is a public document your taxes already paid for. Here is what makes this truly remarkable. The data is public. Germany has roughly 1.5 million certified rainwater harvesting installations operating under DIA in 1989, a national engineering standard with documented performance over decades, and an average German household covers half its toilet and laundry water from rainwater alone. In Australia, about 1 in 4 households uses rainwater as a primary or supplementary supply according to their National Statistics Office, and that figure has held steady through droughts that should have broken it. Singapore built the Marina Barrage and integrated rooftop catchment into the National PUB water plan as a strategic asset, and a country with no native aquifer now meets a substantial share of demand from Skywater. And right here in the United States, Texas Property Code Section 580.004 protects rainwater harvesting on private property. Texas exempts harvesting equipment from sales tax, and the Lower Colorado River Authority has run rainwater education programs for 2 decades. The Germans certified it, the Texans wrote it into law. The Singaporeans built a national strategy around it. Your city pretends none of it exists. Now I'll show you how to scale this up. The Tier 2 build still comes in under $500. You buy a used 275-gallon IBC tote for $80 to $150. You build a 4-inch PVC vertical first flush diverter that holds 5 to 10 gallons for $35. You install an inline 5-micron sediment filter for $25. You add mosquito screen, an overflow pipe to the garden, and a basket of fittings for another $15. If you want pressure to a garden hose, a small 12-volt solar pump runs about $80, and a single 50-watt panel will run it for free for the next 20 years. If you want polishing for non-potable household use, you build a sand and hardwood charcoal biofilter in a stacked 5-gallon bucket column for $40 in materials. That system will give you 1,000 gallons a month off a 1,200 square foot roof in 1.5 inches of rain, and 10,000 to 18,000 gallons a year depending on where you live. Garden irrigation is legal in all 50 states. Toilet flushing is legal in most states with a check valve to prevent backflow. Laundry, livestock, washing the car, hosing the porch. Drinking only after filtration and ultraviolet, and only where your local code permits, because I will not have you cited. The American Rainwater Catchment Systems Association publishes the standards, and Penn State Extension has water audit case studies you can read in an afternoon. My neighbor Levi Esch, in bird in hand, runs a 1,200-gallon tank off his shop roof. And last August, when Lancaster County was on a voluntary water restriction, his garden was the only green half-acre on his road. The hush of stored water under your porch in an August drought is the cool kiss of a spigot when the city is on stage 3 restrictions. And the neighbor across the road is paying a surcharge while your tomatoes are drinking the sky. Now the close. You did not lose this knowledge. It was taken from you slowly, one plumbing code revision at a time, one water utility lobby campaign at a time, one generation at a time. They took the cedar barrel my grandfather set under his gutter in 1964. They took the 1918 USDA bulletin that called the cistern a standard farm supply. They took the simple right to call Skywater by its real name. They took it the way they take most things, not in one loud robbery, but in 100 quiet revisions to forms you never read. Now you have it back. Samuel Byler's 1887 cistern is still full this morning. It is still 54 degrees. The rain does not know what the EPA calls it. The rain has never read a single page of the Safe Drinking Water Act. The rain falls on the roofs of old order farms in Lancaster County, and it falls on the roofs of suburban houses in Phoenix and Atlanta and Sacramento, and it falls the same way on every one of them, and the only question is whether you put a barrel under your downspout this weekend, or whether you let another 10,000 gallons run down your driveway into the storm drain so the city can sell it back to you next month. Tell me in the comments how many inches of rain fall on your town each year, and how many square feet of roof you own. Multiply the inches by 623 for every 1,000 square feet of roof. That number is your stolen number. Post it. I read every one. If you are the kind of person who believes that real practical knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit margin, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe. Next week, I'm going to show you the Amish gravity-fed pressure system that delivers 40 pounds per square inch to a second-floor bathroom using zero electricity and zero pumps. A system my grandfather built into our farmhouse in 1958 that still runs every morning at 4:30. And the utility companies pray you never learn how the pipe is sloped, where the air vent goes, and why the line never freezes in a Lancaster winter.